Hello and welcome in. My name is Mark, aka the Markster. This is video number 22 in the FreeCAD series. Today we'll be drawing the star and looking at some of the tools that are available in the Sketcher workbench for our convenience. In particular, we'll look at the Polygon tool, the Fillet tool, the Trim tool, and the Extend tool, possibly some others as we go through this. So I'm going to go ahead and close that sketch, close this document, create a new one, switch over to the Sketcher. Let me show you which version I'm using. Version 0.19, revision number 19.694. I'm on Windows 10 and I'm using the Blender navigation mode. By the way, if you have questions about FreeCAD, you should go ask on the forum at freecadweb.org. It is a terrific place to get help on using FreeCAD. And as a courtesy to the people there who are going to try to help you, you should press this copy to clipboard button. This copies all this information plus some of the library versions, some of these key libraries that are being used, and that you can paste into the forum when you ask your question. That'll tell them which version you're using, because the answer might be different depending on which version or which operating system and what have you. So copy it to the clipboard, paste it in with your question. It also helps to include a screenshot, your FreeCAD document that can be attached by dragging and dropping onto the form where you type in your question. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. We're going to create a new sketch on the XY plane. The way I always drew a star was like this. By hand, on paper. So let's make our star beginning like this. Now, in FreeCAD, you cannot have crossed edges. This will result in self-intersections. Let's close the sketch and go to part and see this for ourselves. We'll extrude this sketch. Notice I have solid true, but it's not making a solid. It's just extruding those edges into faces. And if we run our check geometry test, we see that it finds some faces are not closed, some wires are self-intersecting. If you look at our shape content, it does show that we have a solid, but I'm not seeing a solid here. So let's close this. I'm going to clear out this error. So if I get another, it will grab my attention. Double click the sketch. This opens it up in the sketch editor. So let's use our trim tool to get rid of some of these internal edges. Click here. Our cursor changes to that trim tool icon. And we just click on the edges to remove. and right click to get out of that mode. Now we have 10 degrees of freedom. So let's select all the edges. They should all be of equal length. So let that be our first constraint. Now we have 4 degrees of freedom. Let's see. Not letting me drag anything. I guess the tangent constraints that were applied automatically, or was keeping me from dragging. This edge is tangent to that edge. So let's try to apply a construction mode circle. All of the outer vertices should be on the circle. So we'll select all the outer vertices and the circle. We can do this all in one go and apply the fixate point on object. And look what happened. What happened here, do you think? Well, let's not panic. Let's undo the last operation. There we are. I was about to panic there. One thing I've learned in FreeCAD is these tangency constraints can cause some problems. So if you have, especially if you have too many of them. So I'm going to delete these tangency constraints if I can get them selected here. One more set. Press the delete key. And now let's see if it will allow us to constrain all these vertices on this circular edge, and it did. But our star now is kind of wonky. Is that a word, wonky? So let's use parallel constraints instead. These opposite edges should be parallel. See if this will work better than the tangency. Are we missing any? These two. Now we have 2 degrees of freedom, and those are the radius of the circle and the angle of the rotation. So we could set an angle, or we can just choose a line and make it horizontal. We can set our radius. We need to be in normal mode, not reference mode here. Set our radius. I'm going to set it to 1. So this circle is a unit circle with a radius of 1. This is our circumcircle. The circumcircle contains all of the vertices on the circle when you're dealing with a polygon, which in this case it is a pentagon. If you drew edges here and here and here, that would be a pentagon. 5-sided polygon. Okay, so we might wonder, just out of curiosity, what the edge length is of a star such as this with a circumradius of 1 millimeter, and we can measure that by going to reference mode. You can select an edge and use this length constraint, and we see that 0.726543. If we made this 10, circumradius 10, then this becomes 7.26. So it's a ratio of the circumradius. We can measure these angles if we like. This one is 36. And this one, what is that, do you think? 108. Now let's close the sketch. View it from the top. And we see that our star has been successfully made into a solid. So let's check the geometry. No errors. Shape content. One solid, one shell. 11 faces, which I think is incorrect. There's five points. Each point has 2 faces, and the top and the bottom should be 12. So there's some, or maybe I'm just interpreting that information wrong. Okay, so now let's hide this, go back to Sketcher, create a new sketch, cancel, I don't want to map it to that, put it on the XY plane, back to normal mode, and let's try out the hexagon, make a hexagon, or should we try to do it by hand first? Let's do it by hand first. Draw out a hexagon. Just roughly, it doesn't have to be exact. Right click to get out of that mode. We'll add this one to that edge. We'll make these opposite sides parallel. And select all the edges and make them all equal with the equality constraint. There is a redundant constraint number 11. Click to select. Okay, we do not need that parallel constraint evidently. Let's delete it and see what that does. Alright, we're looking good. Let's add a circle now. A construction mode circle as our circle. Constraining it to the origin. Select all of our points. And the edge. and apply the constraint. And we have a redundant constraint number 22. Click to select. And that would be this point on the edge constraint. And 19 is also unneeded. And we have run afoul of some error again, so let's undo. See if we can figure out what's going on here. Undo, undo, undo. What is the problem? Don't think I did anything wrong. Let's see if we can apply these individually. Okay, we didn't need them all apparently. Some of these were redundant. By the way, you can tell if a constraint is redundant if you delete the constraint and the degrees of freedom does not change, then that constraint was redundant. And it was just a bug that the auto remove constraints tool did not catch it. So I have that one selected, and there are 1 degrees of freedom. If I delete this with the delete key, now we have 2. And the last degree, of course, is the radius. So we set that to 1. And now, let's see what the side length of a hexagon of circumradius 1 is, out of curiosity. It's 1. Isn't that interesting? And what is the angle here? I think it's 120. Yes, 120 degrees. Each polygon has 2 circles associated. The circumcircle, which gives you the circumradius, which includes the circumcircle contains all of the vertices. There's also an incircle, and the radius of the incircle is the end radius. Let's draw that one. The incircle is the circle that is tangent to all of the edges. And we can try the tangency constraint there. And if we measure the radius of the incircle, we see that the radius of the incircle of a hexagon is 0.866025 times the circumradius. For each polygon, this ratio will be a bit different. Generally, the more edges you have, the closer to 1 this ratio becomes. And if you have 1,000,000 sides, then it's very close to a circle. Okay, let's close this and hide it. And I'll create a new sketch. Deselect, create a new sketch. And let's use the Polygon tool that FreeCAD has provided for us. We'll select hexagon. And what we'll do is we have the Incircle that we're actually creating first. So I made it coincident to the origin. So this is pretty much the same, except it has all these point on edge constraints, and when I made mine, it seemed to imply that these are not all necessary. But I also have other constraints. I think I had some parallel constraints too. So let's make this horizontal here. Set our view back to the top, and the radius, we'll make it 1 also. We'll close this one, open this one back up. I don't see what extra constraints I had, but for some reason these 2 points here did not need to be on the edge, and it would not let me do it. But the other sketch has them. I wonder if I delete that one. Now it shows 1 degree of freedom. Yeah, it's a mystery to me why this is happening. But anyway, that's the Polygon tool. Now let's look at the Fillet tool, since we already did the Trim tool. With the Trim tool, you can use it 2 different ways. One way is to select a vertex, and the other way is to select 2 adjacent edges. And that creates fillets on each of these corners. It also deletes many of those constraints. So let's apply these equality constraints to each of these edges. And equality also to each of these arcs. This will set the radius equal for each. By the way, you can set equality between a circle and an arc to make them both the same radius. I think we're running into possibly the issue with all of these tangency constraints. But let's set another tangency to that arc and that circle, and one here. And it is reducing our degrees of freedom. And one more here. Okay, so we have 1 more degree of freedom. Any idea what that might be? I believe what it is the arc and the edge can be a different ratio to one another. So we just need to set some value. Yeah, that did it. Or we could set one arc to some radius. Either one would work. We'll close the sketch. Let's see if we can extrude this object. And we have a nice rounded prism with fillets. Sometimes the fillet tool that we could have used can be cantankerous. So if you apply your fillets in your sketch itself, then that's another way of applying a fillet. And let's go back to the sketcher. Let's see if there are some more tools in there that we can look at today. Create a new sketch. I don't want it attached. We did not look at this tool here, which is to extend an edge. Create an edge. Let's create a couple edges. Create an arc out here. So with the with this tool, we can extend this edge. How useful is this tool? I don't know, because we can also simply grab that in and move it. Let's apply it also to this arc. I don't know. Okay, I just grabbed the ends. We have an error in our solver. We can ignore that. So that's going to be it for today. I think we've covered enough. We covered the Polygon tool, which we can use to make all of these polygons, and the regular polygon lets you choose the number of sides. We covered the fillet tool, the trim tool, which can be very useful, and the extended edge tool, which I don't know how useful this one is. This tool here, that's something we can look at right quick. Here we are. Sometimes all these constraints can get in your way. You can hide them individually here. For example, this radius constraint, you can hide or show with these check boxes. And this tool here is a convenient way to just hide them all at once. Or we can toggle them individually. So I just hid both of the radius constraints, one for the arc and one for the circle. And by clicking this icon, which is switch the selected constraints or the view to the other virtual space. So now I have only the two maybe that I would be interested in at the moment. And when we swap virtual spaces, all we're really doing here is, notice in this panel, it's just toggling the visibility of these. That's the magic that's going on there. Okay, so that ought to be enough for today. In a later video, we can examine these tools up here. And then maybe these later. These are dealing with B-splines. Then we'll have pretty much everything covered in the sketcher. So once again, I thank you for watching, and have a great day.